The war between Ukraine and Russia gained a different dimension in 2023. As a result of the Ukrainian counteroffensive that began a few months ago, the Ukrainian army has regained control of most of the Russian-occupied areas. As a result of the operations carried out with the right intelligence and the right strategy, the Ukrainian army cut off the supply routes of the Russians, left the Russian army without weapons and ammunition, and destroyed the morale of the Russian soldiers. In south and eastern Ukraine, where conflicts are intensifying, Russian troops have started to engage in trench warfare, and all Putin's army can do now is to hit Ukrainian infrastructure and civilian settlements with cruise missiles and kamikaze UAVs. Since the beginning of the war, Russian troops have suffered a lot of losses, so much so that on some days these losses exceeded 700 per day. Ukraine's chief of staff says at least 300 Russian soldiers were killed every day as a result of the clashes. Although the Russian side does not accept these numbers, the partial mobilization decision announced by Putin himself a few months ago is the biggest proof of these losses. After the partial mobilization decision, 75,000 of the 300,000 Russian citizens who were conscripted into the military have already been sent to the front. But these soldiers are fighting the Ukrainian army without training, weapons, and ammunition. This explains the fact that mobilized soldiers rebelled and fled their troops or fought in the ranks of Ukraine when they changed sides. The careless behavior of the Russians and the fact that they do not take a phenomenon such as war seriously brings defeat to Russia step by step. At the moment, the eastern front of Ukraine is completely inflamed. The response of the Russian army's heavy missile and UAV attack on Ukraine on New Year's Day was very heavy for the Russian army. The Ukrainian army launched an all-out counterattack in Donetsk and Luhansk, turning the Russian positions into hell. The god of war HIMARS once again showed us how he crushed the Russian positions. Russia accused its soldiers of illegally using mobile phones before a deadly Ukrainian attack killed hundreds of soldiers at a military college. The Kremlin has increased the death toll in the New Year attack on Makivka from 63 to 89, the highest admitted casualty in the war. But Ukraine says the actual number is around 400 dead. The Russian Defense Ministry said that 4 Ukrainian HIMARS missiles hit a temporary Russian barracks at a vocational college in Makivka, the sister city of the Russian-occupied regional capital Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. At the time of the attack, Vladimir Putin saluted the soldiers fighting in Ukraine and just delivered the traditional New Year's speech. The military said the main reason for the attack was the illegal mass use of mobile phones by soldiers, although an official investigation has been launched. The Russian Defense Ministry says this factor allowed the enemy to track and determine the coordinates of the location of the troops for a missile attack. Russian soldiers were drunk on New Year's Eve. Many did not comply with the ban on not using smartphones. The geographical location of the drunken Russian soldiers from the front and their conversations with their families prepared their end. For the Kremlin, this was an unacceptable mistake. The result of this mistake was very severe. The possible Russian casualties estimated by the Ukrainian General Staff are close to 800. There were also at least 3 Russian commanders at the military base. The conversations and shares of Russian soldiers on New Year's Eve brought their end. In fact, the Kremlin for the first time acknowledged a fiasco in the Russian army and accused its soldiers of indiscipline. In this case, Russian soldiers present the coordinates of their headquarters to the Ukrainian army, and we can say that drunk and undisciplined Russian soldiers actually blew up their headquarters. After all, what goes around comes around. This is not the first. Since the Russian soldiers had shared live from the front many times before, the Ukrainian intelligence was even able to detect the positions of the Russians on social media. Against the Kremlin's claim, Semyon Pegov, a prominent Russian war correspondent who was awarded the Order of Courage by Putin in late 2022, questioned the ministry's rationale. Pegov said Ukraine could locate troops not by cell phones but by drones and intelligence. Pegov said, "The story of mobile phones is not very convincing. I rarely say this, but at least that's a situation where it's probably better to keep quiet until the end of the investigation. Therefore, it seems like an obvious attempt to slander the blame. Pegov also said that the death toll will increase. Pegov said, unfortunately, their numbers will continue to increase. The data described is most likely for those who are immediately identified. The list of casualties is unfortunately much longer. I can't reveal the sources, but I think they are reliable. The ministry's response came amid growing anger among some Russian commentators who are increasingly vocal about what they see as a half-hearted campaign in Ukraine. Much of the anger on social media was directed at military commanders rather than Putin, who hasn't made a public statement about the attack, another coup after major retreats on the battlefield in recent months. Vladimir Zelensky, who rarely comments on specific Ukrainian military attacks, did not mention the attack. He said the Ukrainian army launched an offensive near Makivka that resulted in the loss of equipment and possibly personnel belonging to the Russian troops, but did not give further details. Russian nationalist bloggers and some pro-Russian officials in the region put the death toll in Makivka in the hundreds, but some say these estimates are exaggerated. The new announcement comes after mourners gathered to mourn the dead in several cities in the Volga region of Samara, where some of the soldiers came from. About 200 people lay roses and wreaths in the center square of the city of Samara while an Orthodox priest was praying. Soldiers also saluted with guns at the commemoration ceremony, where some mourners were seen holding the flags of the ruling United Russia Party. Ekaterina Kolotovkina, head of a group of military wives, said, "It's very difficult, it's scary, but we are not broken. Sorrow unites." Similar meetings were reportedly held in other cities, including Tolyatti, home to Russia's largest automaker, AvtoVAZ. Besides these, Zelensky said that Russia is ready to launch a major offensive. Zelensky said, "We have no doubt that the current masters of Russia will throw out everything they can and anyone they can muster to try and turn the tide of the war, and at least delay the defeat. We must disrupt this Russian script. We are preparing for this. Terrorists must lose. Any attempt at their new attack should fail." A little-known patriotic group that supports the widows of Russian soldiers is urging Putin to order a large-scale mobilization of millions of men and to close the borders to ensure victory in Ukraine. Zelensky reiterated Ukraine claims that Moscow is planning a full-scale mobilization, but Russian officials say this step is not currently being considered. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Putin plans to meet with Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan on Wednesday. This will be the last in a series of talks the two leaders have had since the start of the war. Turkey mediated last year with the United Nations to negotiate a deal allowing grain exports from Ukrainian ports, but chances for serious peace talks seem remote, especially as the fighting rages on. Summing up his meeting with the U.S. Chief of Staff General Mark Milley, Ukrainian General Zaluzhny thanked the U.S. general for helping provide anti-missile weapons systems, which he said were neutralizing more and more of the Russian missiles targeted by Kiev. Zaluzhny said he was discussing what equipment Ukraine needed to improve its chances against Russia, and that was a daily message from top officials. Sunak's office said in a statement that UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak can count on the UK for support in the long term, as evidenced by the recent delivery of over 1,000 air defense missiles to Zelensky. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said in a statement that in the last 24 hours, Russia carried out 7 missile strikes on civilian infrastructure, 18 airstrikes, and more than 85 attacks from multiple launch rocket systems in 3 cities: Kramatorsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. The Ukrainian General Staff said that there were casualties among the civilian population, but Russia denies targeting civilians. The reports submitted by the Ukrainian General Staff have not yet been independently verified. Ukraine's Chief of Staff and Western states say that the loss of Russian troops in Ukraine exceeded 100,000. Although this number is not confirmed by Russia, we can understand this from the fact that Russian troops mostly fought defensively, while the Ukrainian army is defending its homeland to the end with the support it receives from the West. It seems that things will not improve for the Russians. We know who will be on the losing side when this war is over, and you, our valued viewers, know too. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Thank you for watching us.